Hey everyone, welcome to Shiloh Ranch Church. At Shiloh Ranch, we have a lot of activities constantly going on. We have what's called the 1017 Project, which supplies food to families in need. We have the Firewood Project in the winter, which supplies firewood to families in need. We have amazing worship and scripture-based sermons every single Sunday, and we have an awesome team that you will get to meet along the way. But without further ado, let's head into the service.
Good morning, Shiloh Ranch Church Online. I got Mary with me here today in the studio.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to be back in the studio.
It's a beautiful day. I'm glad to have you with me.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
We're doing church online.
We are so glad to have all of you online with us, whether you're joining on Facebook or our online platform. Hi, welcome. Say hello in the chat.
Welcome. Take notes today. Yeah. Jordan and I will be doing a live stream tonight at 8 p.m.
Pacific Standard Time.
And we'll be talking about the sermon, but we'll also just be talking in general. So write down questions so we can answer them there.
It's a fun time.
If you want to support Shiloh Ranch and or tithe or so on, the app, Shiloh Ranch Church, the website, shilohranch.com. Super easy. You can also send physical mail to P.O. Box 177, Powell, Butte, Oregon 97753. I'm proud of myself for that.
It's funny how we've memorized that. Just how many times we've done this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't even know my home address.
I do.
Oh, okay. Anyways,
we're going into worship now, and then we'll be back here to talk about the sermon.
All right, you guys, here we go into worship. Jesus, we're just grateful for your sacrifice. God, we know the blood of Jesus makes us white as snow. God, we know that it's not of the good that we have done because we're sinners, but it's because of Jesus that we're set free. We love you, we worship you. Amen.
We are back, and we're about to go into the sermon.
Yeah, what do we have today?
We've got Jordan back in studio for a new sermon.
Cool.
I'm excited for it. Take notes so that we can talk about it together. Yeah, pretty straightforward stuff.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention is we do have a virtual prayer room available. So if you are on our online platform, you should see a button to request prayer, and that puts you into a private chat with a member of our prayer team. Now, if you're on Facebook and you don't know what we're talking about, head over. The link should be in chat, but it's our other online platform that we live stream on, and it's definitely a cool setup because you can click on the link, you can head into a prayer room with a prayer team member, and yeah, it's a good time. So if you'd like prayer, even though you may be at home, not here at Shiloh with us, you can still receive prayer. So
definitely good thought. So let's just go into the sermon, and we'll be back here to talk to you guys after worship.
Okay, here we go into the sermon.
Jonah chapter 1. Let me read you Jonah chapter 1. I love this. It's one of my favorite stories. I preach about Jonah, it seems like, about every other year. And every other year when I go into it, it's just crazy how much more there is there. Jonah chapter 1 says, "The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, and said, 'Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me.'" Anybody not heard of Jonah and the whale? Don't tattle, because people outside of the church know Jonah the whale. People that don't go to church, people that don't have a relationship with God, people that don't even know the Bible. If you live in the boundaries of the United States, you've probably heard of Jonah and the whale. It's the one that people love to argue with the most, because science tells you that's not even possible. The Bible's not literal. If Jonah is a story in the Bible, then the Bible's not literal. And so everybody knows this story. It's one of the most famous, but one of the most misunderstood stories in the Bible. It says that God called Jonah to something that was completely unfair. He didn't just say, go to your neighbor's house and do something nice for your neighbor. He's saying, I want you to go and do something that would take place 100% on foreign soil. He's the only prophet that was ever called to a ministry that was 100% on foreign soil. He was calling him to people that would, in the Old Testament, this would have made no sense. In the Old Testament, he's calling a prophet of God from the Jewish people. He's calling Jonah to go be a prophet to Gentiles. So Jonah, the frustration from Jonah would have been like, that doesn't make sense at all. Let me give you some history of Nineveh. Nineveh was the capital of Assyria. Assyria was ruthless. If you want to look up their own history, it's brutal. It wasn't like God told Jonah, I need you to go to California. Close, but too soon. We're talking, this is life-threatening type stuff. Assyria was an enemy of the Jewish people, and Nineveh was the capital of the enemy. And I know that in church we love to pretend that we're Jesus followers and we don't have enemies and we don't have tribalism in these churches, and these churches don't experience tribalism. And then what happens? We get on Fox News and we're like, I'll tell you what about these fill in the blanks, whatever the group is. And I'm not, don't take this to a political place, because Lord knows it's a hot button right now. But even in church, we have tribalism. We have tribalism. One of the worst exhibitions of tribalism? When there's a group that's doing better than we are. See, we think of tribalism as we hate somebody that's lesser than us. That's not true. We generally despise people who are doing better than us. And you know what you don't want to see from a group that's doing better than you? We don't want to see them do even better. You know why this is a hard concept to understand? Because if we're being honest, there's not many groups in the history of humanity that have done better than we do. It's a hard one to understand. It's hard to put yourself in Jonah's position because we are such a blessed people. Jonah's fear, God says, go to Nineveh and warn them that my judgment is coming. And Jonah's fear was that it would work. His fear in this moment was, if I go, you probably will spare them. They probably will repent. And this is at a time when the Jewish people were in rebellion. So now think of the dynamics here. Like, we think of Jonah as just this rebellious character that God's like, boo, and he's like runs away and does his own thing. That's not what happened. What happened was he's calculating all this and going, my own people won't repent. I'm a prophet and my own people won't repent. What if I go to the enemy? And I go to these horrible people who have committed horrible atrocities against my people, and I tell them that God is going to spare them if they'll repent, and then they repent when my people won't. Do you see where, like, all of a sudden, like, the story is a little unfair how it starts. It doesn't explain all this. It just says, God told Jonah, go to Nineveh. Why would God, if you're Jonah, why would God call me to Gentiles? You got to go back. This is before Jesus. This is before it's open to everybody. You've got God's chosen people, and God is just pushing people back so that the possibility of Jesus can remain possible, and the anti-venom of sin, which is Jesus, could arrive to people and to humanity. And so Gentiles weren't even thought of as people by the Jewish community. They were saying, why would you call me to the Gentiles? It was too much. And here's what I think. I've run from God. Let me just admit, I have, in my life, ran from God out of rebellion. Anybody ever been 17, 18 years old? We know what it's like to run from God out of rebellion. And so when you see someone running from God, it's easy to assume that they are running from God the same way that you ran from God. But what we see from Jonah is this, is that Jonah was running for relief. He needed relief from this call that God had placed on his life. He wanted relief from it. He wanted away from this call. He's running out of desperation. Was there some rebellion to it? Sure. But the reality was that the call of God was crushing him. Have you ever been in a situation where it feels like that God's rules or God's word is just sort of restrictive? I'm going to circle back on that. Verse 3 says that Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed to Tarshish. He went down to Joppa. We've all heard this story, where he found a ship bound for that port. After paying the fare, because it always costs you something to run from God, that's not what the sermon's about. He went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. If you've been raised in church, and I say this all the time, but just for you guys that may not know me or you guys that don't know my story, I was raised in church. My dad is a pastor. Before that, he was a missionary, so we went to 1,000 different churches every weekend, some 2 or 3 churches in the same day. That's a true story. My grandpa was a pastor. My grandpa, it was funny, I don't know why, but my grandpa was really proud of his little badge that they gave him for being in the ministry for 50 years. He when he'd wear it, he'd be like, what do you got there, Grandpa? Oh, you noticed. Oh, it's just this thing. It's just for being in the ministry for 50 years. It's no big deal. You noticed it? Look at this. It's got real rubies in it. Like, something that you see when you've been in church your whole life, something that you see is that we as people turn the Bible, we translate the Bible from Jesus into American. So hard not to. It's so hard not to translate the Bible from Jesus into American. We have this American culture. We have this American values. We have this American system, life, liberty, and the pursuit of unalienable rights. I mean, we got this red, white, and blue concept, and we're so proud of it, and we love it, and we think so highly of it. And then the Bible says something, we're like, sure, come on in. The Bible will say something, and when the Bible sounds similar to our culture and our nation, then we invite the Bible in, and we're like, we just love Jesus so much. Do you know my favorite verse in the whole Bible? Jeremiah 29:11. I tattooed it onto my waist because, like, Jesus wanted me to. Anyway. We love verses that talk about freedom and prosperity and hope. And let me tell you something. If you live for God long enough, there will come a point where, like, God, it feels like you are crushing the life out of me. And this doesn't feel, God, if I'm being honest, this doesn't feel very American of you. Is this offensive? That sometimes God isn't American enough? That sometimes God doesn't do things the way that the white culture does things? Am I allowed to say that? Like that Jesus wasn't white or American or Republican? So the word of God comes from Jonah, and Jonah's response was, God, that's too much. That's too hard. And he runs for relief. Have you ever read Galatians 5? Here's the thing. When we translate the Bible into American, we as Americans, we are circumstance junkies. Circumstance junkies. It's why social media exists, is so we can catch a snapshot of a favorable circumstance. We just want to make sure we have a picture of a favorable circumstance so other people can see our favorable circumstances, because we think of a good life as being good circumstances. So when God says, I'm going to give you a good life, we're like, great, where are the circumstances? But do you see what happened? We just added something to the Bible that the Bible did not say. This is so disappointing to find out that sometimes Jesus is less concerned with your circumstances than you are. You're like, hello, God. What happened to I'm a good father? I got bills. I got a flat tire. I got relationship issues. There's things. I have bad circumstances, and it feels like you're not holding up to your end of the bargain. And Jesus goes, you read that in American. You need to talk to your translator. It's not what I said. Galatians 5, let me give you an example. It is for freedom. We love that word. It is for freedom that Christ set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by the yoke of slavery. I love that because America, freedom. 2 people have died for your freedom. Anybody heard this? And I'm not being critical of the statement. But we take what God says about freedom and we apply what America or our culture or our family or our state or our county or our culture says about freedom, and we get a very confusing concept of God. So that when God comes in and does something that's difficult or that seems harsh, we go, God, you're not playing fair. Jonah would have said to God in that moment, God, you can't call me to this. We don't like the Ninevites. You're telling me you're about to wipe them off the face of the planet? Good! You can't ask me to be the thing that saves them. I want them wiped out more than anyone else. Think of this. The enemy. You don't have enemies. You don't have enemies. If you had enemies, that means your life would be in danger right now. And if you're being honest, your life's not in danger. You know what we think enemies are? People who tweet mean things. Like, what a first world problem. And then do you know what she said? Can you imagine Jonah who's like, huh? No, that's not what I mean. I mean, like, they have strung up my family members and murdered them mercilessly. We have enemies. You have drama. It's not the same. And God is calling him to go be the relief to the enemy. And what we would say to that is, no, we are free people. We are free to choose. We are free to do. We are free people. God was interfering. Have you ever felt like God interfered in your life? I will raise my hand. I felt like that this week. If you want to know where this sermon really came to life, is that I feel like God, let me live it this week. God interferes every now and then. And sometimes God interferes in ways that it doesn't feel like it's making your life better. Sometimes it feels like God interferes in ways that makes your life worse. Have you ever been doing a good job and gotten fired or laid off? Like you're doing a good job and you get laid off? Young people, I don't know, older people. Have you ever had a relationship end that you didn't want to end? Have you ever had relationship issues that you didn't choose? And it feels like maybe that God didn't interfere, but that God allowed interference? That where was God when this was happening and God could have stopped it? Or where was this when God could have, come to your rescue and he didn't? Oh, we've never been more frustrated with God than it feels like God is interfering in a way that frustrates us. Like we're trying to tell a story, God, could you just help us a little bit? Have you ever known somebody, I read a story, and I don't know the guy, I have no connection to him whatsoever, but there was a guy that was a football player that got in a car accident and cut his arm off. He's a professional football player, and he got in a car accident and cut his arm off. And the reason that made national news is it just seems unfair, doesn't it? This guy that uses his body for what he does, he's passionate about this sport that he plays, and then he loses a limb in a car accident. It's so easy for us as people to go, that does not go along with this guy's story, right? Like this guy's living a story. This guy's got family that's depending on his income, right? This guy's got people that have put all their hopes and dreams into this guy and his story, and it feels like God just sort of interfered with his story. So Jonah did what any good red-blooded American free man would have done. And he decided he was going to tell his own story. God said, I want you to do this. And Jonah's like, that's too much. You're asking too much. I don't want that to be my story. What about this? What about this? I don't want that to be my story. I don't want to be the guy that brought deliverance to those people. Again, this is a hard one because we really don't have enemies. The people that we're the most mad at are people that might restrict our freedom a little bit. And I get it. I get how frustrating that is. But it's not the same. Jonah is going, I don't want that to be my story. You're putting me in a position where it's a lose-lose, God. Either I disobey you and I suffer, or I obey you and those people are. And so you know what? I'd rather suffer. Here's what I believe Jonah knew. Jonah knew he was going to suffer. And he accepted that he was going to suffer as long as it meant relief was not going to be brought to people who were causing his people so much pain. So he gets on a boat. You guys know this. He gets on a boat. What happens? Everything goes great. And they're going to sink. Oh, because here comes God again interfering. He runs from God, and God's like, oh, I'm not done interfering. I'm going to make a storm. And everyone around you is going to suffer for your disobedience. That probably could be its own sermon, right? Have you ever had a family member that you really, 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 really loved who didn't love themselves? And they just caused pain to themselves and everybody around them. And it's like they don't just hurt themselves. They hurt everybody in their little circle. But by loving them, you can't remove yourself from their circle. You're committed to these people. And you're like, would you just quit causing damage to everybody around you? So that's what's happening. Jonah is causing everybody around him a headache because he's in disobedience. It says, instead, the men did their best to row back to land. Because Jonah, listen, if you want to say that Jonah was a bad guy, Jonah is this bad dude, then you have to also consider that when they were in a bind, Jonah goes, throw me overboard. If you'll kill me, you'll be okay. Listen, he was sacrificial enough, but for his own people. He was down to be a sacrifice. He was down to go to the mat for his people. He just didn't want to go to the mat or be a sacrifice for other people, for people he didn't feel like he was called to. So if you'll throw me overboard, you'll be okay. Instead, the men tried their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Then they cried out to the Lord, please, Lord, do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, Lord, have done as you have pleased. This is on you, God. This is not on us. Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. At this, the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice. Isn't it cool how God is at work in other people's lives, even as he's dealing with Jonah? He's like, okay, Jonah, I'm going to deal with you, but while I'm dealing with you, hey, what's up, guys? Now, the Lord provided, this is where we run into, listen, if you cannot in your spirit accept that Jonah was actually physically swallowed by an actual physical fish, fine, I don't care. I believe, of all the things I say that I believe about God, This one doesn't seem like it would be too hard. But if you're saying, like, I can only believe this story if you say that it's not literal, it doesn't really matter. For the sake of this story, if you're going to say, like, he didn't get swallowed by a literal fish, fine. It doesn't affect the story. But listen to what the word says. The word says now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, whether that was symbolism, whether that's literalism, makes no difference. Here's what I love about the Old Testament. The Old Testament is like one of those movies that you're watching and you're watching and you're watching, and then in the end, the things are revealed, and like what you see in the Old Testament is that nothing you were watching was actually the story. What was actually going on was like symbolism. It was behind the scenes. Anybody ever like, whoa, huh. Nothing that's going on in this story of Jonah is as it seems. There is so much going on in this story that seems so easy to comprehend. And then when you start to dig into what was actually happening, because this is the Old Testament, what you see is there is so much to this story. Let me give you an example. The name Jonah means dove. Now, that's not a huge reveal. It's not like, but let me tell you what a dove symbolized. Let me tell you what a dove was. Let me tell you why doves mattered in the New Testament. Because if you can understand why doves mattered in the New Testament, the story of Jonah being a dove in the Old Testament starts to make sense. Okay? When you would go to the temple and you had to make a sacrifice because you were poor, you didn't have any money, then what would happen is that you could buy a dove, and the dove could be a sacrifice for you being poor. You were supposed to sacrifice a lamb, but if you couldn't sacrifice a lamb, you would sacrifice a dove. So a dove was a sacrifice for a lesser demographic. Are you with me? When Jesus' family went to make sacrifices in the temple, do you know what they sacrificed? Doves. So there's this connection between the sacrifice for a lesser people and the concept of a dove. Jesus is already telling the story of a sacrifice to a lesser people through Jonah, and Jonah wouldn't even have known it. It says that Jonah was called to the Gentiles. Ew! I mean, that's just Jordan's translation of what Jonah said. Go to the Gentiles. Ew, no. I hope they die. Save them. No. But what Jonah didn't understand is that he wasn't telling his story. This is where we get so messed up, is we think that God is helping us tell our story. God is not helping you tell your story. That is where we get so frustrated, because we're like, Jordan, mountain. Let's go, God. And then God drags you this way, and you're like, no. Okay, we're going to go around. We're going to go around, but then we're going to go back to the mountain. And like, okay, we're going to... God, you're interfering. I was going to be married by 21, kids by 25, college degree. Nothing was going to be a problem. I wasn't going to have any debt. What? Why did I just go through another breakup? God, I'm almost 30. I mean, my marriage was going to be good. I've got a really good encourager back there. My marriage was going to be perfect, and I mean, I don't want to be ungrateful, God, but my job, it was going to be so fulfilling. But I was going to have a career, and I was going to be rich, and then I just got fired. So why do you keep interfering with my life? And what God is showing us through Jonah is God doesn't really seem to have any interest in helping you tell your story. I mean, he loves you. God loves you, but he thinks your story's kind of stupid and selfish and one-dimensional and uninteresting and narcissistic and vapid and harmful and not helpful to anybody else. He doesn't care that your life doesn't look like an episode of The Bachelor. And we get so mad at God because we're trying to direct God to our story, and God's going, I'm not telling your story. See, Jonah was named Jonah on purpose. Jonah wore the name Jonah as a child and didn't even know why. Because Jonah was created to help tell the story about Jesus. This is a good story. This is a good sermon. I don't know if you guys know this or not. It's about to get better. See, what Jonah couldn't see is like, wait a minute, this isn't about God helping me tell my story. It's about God is recruiting me to tell his story, a story that hasn't even been told yet. Jonah was going to demonstrate the story of Jesus. There's 4 chapters of Jonah. The story where God calls Jonah and Jonah runs, that's chapter 1. The story where Jonah repents, that's chapter 2. The story where Jonah walks with God, that's chapter 3. The story where Jonah runs in front of God, that's chapter 4. It's like this cycle that we go through with God that's being demonstrated in the chapters of Jonah. Do you know that there's one prophet that Jesus likened himself to? Just one. There was only one prophet that Jesus said, I'm like this guy. You know who it was? Jonah. The sacrifice to the poor, the sacrifice to the Gentiles, called to the Gentiles. Do we understand that what Jonah was Jonah was a demonstration of the story of Jesus? And what made Jonah so unfulfilled in life and so angry in life is he was determined that God was going to help him tell his story. And God went, I don't care about your story. Matthew chapter 12. Verse 39 says, he, Jesus, answered, a wicked and adulterous generation asked for a sign, but none will be given it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Even the fish mattered. Even the concept of a fish where it says that he is going to be lost for 3 days and rebirthed, because isn't this what he ran from God? God captured him. There was a death. There was a resurrection. Because that's a prayer of Jonah. Jonah says, I was dead. I was done for. I was sinking. It says to the roots of the mountains. Isn't that a funny way of saying that? I was sinking down to the roots of the mountains. I was dead. I was lost. My story that I thought was going to bring me freedom, this pursuit of freedom, this pursuit, the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. See, Jonah was a good American. My pursuit of freedom brought me to a place of ultimate restriction. When I was so concerned with my own freedom, I found myself in the most restrictive place talked about in the Bible. And it was Jesus who would be a sacrifice for the Gentiles. Hey, if you're interested in managing your own life, let me just tell you, when you get so interested in managing your own life, you're going to be heartbroken your entire life. John chapter 8, I'm going to hurry through this because I'm about out of time. It says, to the Jews who had been believing him, Jesus said, if you hold to my teachings, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Free. So imagine Jesus were to show up and go, if you Americans will listen to me, you can be free. Verse 33, tell me this doesn't sound like an American response. And I'm not one bit anti-American. We are free to serve. We forget that part. Verse 33, they answered him, we are Abraham's descendants. We have never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we shall be set free? You know what they said? Oh yeah, Jesus? Well, let me give you a little number, 1776. We already are free. Jesus said, you can be free. We already are free. Jesus says, very truly I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Oh, wait a minute. We live as the most slave-driven people in the freest country in history. Because we're so interested in telling our own story, we're pursuing everything we think will benefit our story, and we find ourselves restricted and in slavery. And it doesn't happen right off. It doesn't happen. I mean, you live 10 years making a good living, and then pretty soon you get an opportunity on that 11th year, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to give up my salary. Do you see the slavery in that? Do you see? God's going, let's go tell my story. And you're like, yeah, but I'm almost to the top of my own story. Like, my story's pretty cool. And so maybe I'll just quote Jeremiah 29:11, but don't worry, I'll get it tattooed for you. And Jesus is saying, you don't see that you're slaves. You don't see that you are slaves to the sin that you allow to continue in your life. And let me tell you something. Sometimes the sin doesn't really hurt your story. But sometimes your sin is devastating to the story of Jesus in your life because you don't look like Christians, you don't look like Christ followers. We start to resemble hypocrites. We start to resemble this most disgusting version of Christianity, which is that we claim all the things of Jesus, but we don't obey, we don't do. None of our lives look like Christ, and people look at us, and the story of Jesus told through our lives is actually a really negative story about Jesus. I know this seems harsh, but have you ever known somebody who's like, I'm a Christian? How can you be a Christian and still, fill in the blanks? Because sin sometimes doesn't really hurt your story about yourself. Sometimes we get so mad at God for interfering and not honoring our story that we had in mind because our story collectively is a story about Jesus. You know why we get together and we sing? You know why we get together and talk about Jesus? Is because collectively we are a cell of a bigger organism that tells the story about a Jesus who came and interfered on our behalf, who brought us out of sin because you were not free to obey. Your obedience is what keeps you in freedom. The obedience of Jesus is not restrictive. The obedience to Jesus is what keeps you free. And you didn't even have the opportunity to be obedient until Jesus set you free from your sin. The story that we are telling is not about you. You are not the main character and everybody else supporting roles in the story of your life. The movie is not about you. Your story is not about you. And in fact, I'm going to agree with Jesus. Everybody's got a story and they're all kind of uninteresting. You are 2 generations from being a face in a photograph. How much do you stop and think about the day-to-day lives of your great-grandparents? I mean, we're not nearly as significant as we want to believe. We can never be more miserable than when we try to cling to the virtue of our own story. And Jesus is going, let it go. It's a story about my life. It's a story about Jesus. It's a story about the cross. It's a story about the redemption. And you're invited to be a part of that. And your sin keeps distracting from the story of Jesus. Let's pray. Lord, give us, I don't know. I mean, I can describe the problem, but to be honest, the solution is so difficult. How could anybody choose it? How could anybody choose a solution that rips us apart from our own desires and our own will? God, I think to some degree we're all Jonah. We're all Jonah who we have this revelation moment and we don't like what we see. We don't like what we're called to. It feels like you're interfering. It feels like you're taking away from this story that we have planned for ourselves. But God, I know that you being God, you have miraculous ways of opening our eyes and bringing us to a place of repentance and understanding and obedience. God, it's obedience that brings us freedom. When you look around, what you see is that it's not a governmental regulation that brings freedom. If that was the case, every American would be free of addiction and free of sin and free of all the things that we find ourselves in. God, show us a freedom that comes only through obedience to you. And the fact that we get to be obedient is because you interfered. You brought us out. You're bringing us out of our sin. Open our eyes, God. Open our eyes to see life for what it really is. That we get to participate in a story about your life. And God, here's you know what? You can look up just for a second. You can look up. Let me tell you something. For you guys that have beat yourself up about failure, let me just tell you, sometimes your failure tells the most beautiful stories of Jesus. You know, sometimes your failure doesn't tell a very good story about you. Sometimes your failure is the thing that paints Jesus in this beautiful light that says, even me and my wretchedness and my disgusting life and the mistakes and these things that I've done, if you can see Jesus, what you're going to see is that even me, he can even do something with me and in my life. So if you're sitting here beating yourself up about your failures, let me tell you, you've got a unique opportunity to tell the story of the redemption of Jesus. Your story's probably out the window. That's okay. But his isn't. His isn't. His story in your life is not done. And your failure did not disqualify you from it. Let's pray. Lord, give us perspective even on our failures. Give us an understanding of who you are and what you want to do in our lives so that we can tell a better, more clear story of you and who you are. Pray in Jesus' name, amen.
And
Yeah, God, we just invite the Holy Spirit into our lives to overflow. And God, in the deepest caverns, in the deepest crevices of our soul, we invite you, God. We know that you are a living God. Would you fall afresh on us? Come and wake us from our sleep, Father. We love you. We thank you for this time of worship. In your name we pray. Amen.
That brings Sunday to an end.
Yes, it does.
Well, maybe not Sunday, but specifically the online service.
Yeah, brings us to the end. But I have a good feeling that we'll do this same time, same place next week.
Yeah. Something would have to go absolutely terribly wrong for us to not do this next week.
So we'll see you guys next week. We love you guys. Reach out this week if you need prayer or support. Join us on Facebook tonight at 8:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's going to be a fun little Q&A.
Yeah, it'll be super fun. Bring your questions, whether they are related to the sermon or not, just life questions in general. If you've ever looked at Jordan and thought of a question to ask him, now's a perfect time to do it.
Yeah.
So we'll see you guys then. We'll see you next week. Have a great week. Love people around you, and bye for now.
Bye.